Good morning. My name is Linda Leibel, and I serve as president of the Board of Trustees of the Unitarian Universalist Church. Thanks for joining us today. As the pandemic progresses, the UUCS board continues to carefully consider how to maintain our physical safety while also providing for the connection and emotional well-being of the congregation. We must keep one another safe, and we must cultivate our connections with one another. Please continue to practice the basic public health protocols, wearing masks, social distancing, limiting group size, being outside whenever possible, and hand washing. Small groups such as covenant groups and committees are encouraged to gather in person outside at homes or on the church grounds, practicing all of our safety protocols. We're also planning one-off events utilizing carefully planning and all of our safety measures. Allow me to thank every one of you for doing, let's try this again. Allow me to thank everyone for all you are doing to make this congregation a place of service, care, and fellowship through this very difficult year. I especially want to thank the Wild Hall Task Force and the Elevator Campaign, who are making a physical center of our facility more accessible and usable. A shout out to Alan Jenkins for his leadership with the Elevator Fund, and Rob Gettings for all the work that he's done with the elevator company for us. Buildings and Grounds, who have made needed improvements to our facility. Naomi Richardson, Rob Gettings, John Pfeiffer, Jeanette Keepers, Deb Williams, and Karen Mitchell. The AV team, led by Andrew Cook and Fred Stoll, and the worship team, led by Ruth Stanton and Palma Eisner, that provide this service every week. The pastoral care team, Joyce Harrison and Mitch Eisner, that help us when we're in need. The children and adult RE teams, that would be Sybil and Jim, inventing wonderful programs for all ages. The covenant groups, led by Marilyn and Claire, that keep us connected. The financial team, led by Barbara Tisdale, and the stewardship team, led by Brandon Carter, who have helped us choose abundance and generosity even in these times of financial strain. The social justice team, led by Alice Sutton, who has so many people helping. One of the great things that they've done, they're celebrating over 6,000 masks made and distributed all over the country by this team. And our board, who works hard every week to hold us together. That would be Janice Tuck, Betty Custer, Christy Magnuski, Pate Randall, Robin Carter, Peggy Hamrick, and myself. A little update on the annual fund drive. We have received $154,800 in pledges in the last 2 weeks. If you have not pledged yet, please go online. It's very easy to do from there. What an amazing congregation this is, especially in times like these. We need each other. Thanks for being a congregation of care, and thanks for being a part of the congregation today.
What an incredible list of people. People up here at all hours, 7 days a week, on stormy Saturdays and cold Sundays, all through the week doing so much. You know, that list is incredible, and as incredible is that there are 3 times as many people that we could name who have got their hands involved. Linda is nodding her head fervently as I say this. Thank you to everybody who is making so much happen. It is amazing. Welcome this morning, and happy Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day can be a beautiful day, and it also can be a day of real heartbreak, real sadness. If this is a day that is beautiful for you, then we all celebrate that with you and give thanks. Hope that is true for all of us throughout our lives, woven throughout the story of our lives. Times of love and fullness and joy. This has been a week of heartbreak for our church. More than one of us has lost someone very close to us. And we've lost a member of this church who lived within the heart of this congregation. Broken heart comes from the vulnerability that love requires of us. When we love, we open ourselves to another. It's a risk that we take. Many people choose not to take the risk because they fear the pain that may come, that will come. But when we love, we make ourselves vulnerable to each other. We risk the pain of loss and of leaving. And when that time comes, it hurts. It hurts. You can feel it. In every spiritual tradition, this concept of love is not sentimental and it is not sweet. And in many of those traditions, the origin of the love that changes the world, compassion, comes from a broken heart. There are even spiritual traditions that attribute a broken heart to the divine. That it is when our hearts are broken that we know best what love is, and we can best share that love with the world. On this Valentine's Day, when we have lost someone dear to this church and feel that heartbreak within us, and when many of us have lost friends and partners, those closest to us, who we love most, and we feel that pain. May our broken hearts be the place from which we share a love to heal the broken heart of this world. Thank you for being a congregation of such care. I love being a part of you. Happy Valentine's Day.
In an interview about his most recent masterpiece of modern dance, entitled Afterwardsness, which was performed during the current pandemic, renowned choreographer Bill T. Jones reflected on how the public safety protocols of our lives today can become like a dance itself. He said, there were pandemic rules, the rules of the space. Who could go where? Those rules are also choreographic. Dancers should be careful not to be so close to each other that they're breathing on each other. That means that there's a certain way in which the choreography is like gaseous clouds, avoiding, curling around each other, and wonderful intention across great space. The intention to be in unison with somebody who was 60 feet away. You could feel the dancers really striving to psychically connect across space. The link to this interview is on the UUCS website.
There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul. And it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's
not have a creed that states what all members believe. But we do have a covenant. Our covenant, written by this congregation, guides the ways in which we want to live in relation to one another. These words, powerful when written, continue to gain power as our congregation embraces these words. It is so strange. This is the first time I have been in front of the camera without you all here. And so I'm going to have to imagine that you at home are saying these words as I normally would hear them. Let us join together. We are a people of faith and hope. Together we covenant to strive to become our better selves, to honor both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to respond to systems of violence and oppression with the power of a love beyond belief. Now, normally this would be the time in our service when we share our joys and concerns by placing a shell or a stone in the rippling bowl here in the sanctuary. Though we are not here, Stacy Jackson continues to post creative rippling bowls weekly on our closed Facebook page. We invite you at this time to visualize that bowl and to share silently with our community now, just like Bill T. Jones dancers doing psychic connection across space. And know that your joys and concerns are held in our hearts. Blessings. The generosity of this congregation, as Scott says almost every week, is awe-inspiring. So many share their time, their talents, their skills, their money with this church and the wider community. During this time when we cannot pass the plate here, please visit our website at uucs.org, and there you will find all kinds of ways to help. There is also below the live stream a button that says Help. This page is updated weekly and contains numerous ways that you can share your gifts with us and the community. Now, every month we have a Share the Plate, and this month our Share the Plate money, which is, it's designated online here. If we were passing the plate, it would be half of what was given and not designated. But the Share the Plate this month goes to support little free libraries for the children in our county. The funds will go towards constructing a little free library here in the South Converse neighborhood, and to supply books for this library and the books for two other little libraries. One is at Pasos up in Boiling Springs, and the other is at Angel Ministries at the Maranatha Free Church. To learn more about this program, take a look at the February Unison. Please give as you are able to our fundraisers or donate to one of the many other funds that we support. It is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Jewel, thank you so much for your authenticity, and your clarity. That was just perfect the way that you led us. The effort to connect across space. I'm so grateful for this congregation and the depth of intention that guides us. Join me in silence. Over decades, Bill T. Jones has developed a dance company, a company that bears both his name and that of his partner, Arnie Zane, who died decades ago now, complications due to AIDS. But those two men who loved each other so much and who worked to be in the vanguard of modern dance in the 80s and 90s, developed a dance company that Bill T. Jones continues to shepherd and to lead. It is one of the leading companies in the world. And this past spring 2020, that company was in production in Massachusetts for the world premiere of a new piece, a masterwork that would involve more than 100 people, a massive set, moving parts, the choreography of dancers, music created for that occasion, and people who normally are in New York or elsewhere in the world in residency in Massachusetts getting ready for this world premiere performance. So much resource poured out, financial and beyond the financial, just human effort poured into giving birth to the idea and developing the idea and collaborating and acquiring funding and then hiring and planning and practicing and finally ready to go, selling tickets to produce the show. And right as they were prepared to begin performing, the pandemic struck. And suddenly one dancer and then another had to go into quarantine, interrupting their final preparations, their final practice schedule. To the great consternation of the whole team, but especially Bill T. Jones as the leader of the team. He's on a deadline. It's a lot of work, so many years of preparation. And now this, interruptions, shifts and changes. And then suddenly the whole thing was put on hold. And everyone had to go into quarantine. You remember exactly a year ago when all this began to break open for us. All that work frozen, stopped. And all the frustration, the anger, the heartbreak, the question about what to do, how to keep people paid, how to proceed. And then the quarantine continued. It drug on for weeks and then into months. And what had looked like a temporary pause now became much longer. The question of would that work even happen? Bill T. Jones and his dance company was approached by another location, another funder, to produce a work in the pandemic Could they, in the challenge of quarantine, produce a work in the pandemic that would be relevant and accessible? Could they work within all the parameters imposed to produce something beautiful and creative when people need it? Something of relief, but also something more, something of making out of our constraints, building something new. And the first thought was, we've got something. Can we just do that? But it was designed for an era before this. It couldn't happen. And so they began to work and to think, to experiment, not knowing the way forward, but saying, yes, we can find a way. Yes, we will find a way. And slowly going back into their repertoire and into the composition of their core company. What are our skills? What are our gifts? What can we do within these limitations to create something new? As I did last week, I want to just encourage you. The link to an interview and pictures, an interview you can either read or listen to or both, and pictures that you can follow. A link to this has been provided in today's order of service and on this YouTube channel and on our Facebook page and on our webpage and in this week's publications, The Happenings, and in this month's Unison. We've tried to put it in a lot of places where you can run into it. And I want to encourage you, if you have not listened to or read that interview yet, if you've not looked at those pictures, to just pause this recording. I'm going to be right here. But I want to urge you to go and listen to that, or to read it, and to look at the pictures especially. Everything that I say, however good or poor it is secondary to what that group of people did. It's a concrete example and a metaphor for human adaptation. And so I want to encourage you just to pause this. I invite you to come back. It doesn't have to be an either or, but if you choose either or, choose that. And I'll offer some more thoughts in just a moment. The dance company produced a work within all of the strict protocols that we recall from last spring and summer in New York, when the pandemic was at a fever pitch there. They calculated appropriate risks and necessary parameters, necessary boundaries. And as they worked with each other, as we've heard Jewel read, they discovered that the rules of the pandemic became a kind of choreography itself, that those limitations were not only restrictions, but possibilities. And that by taking them seriously and taking their work seriously, they could discover a way to move not only around each other or in the same space as one another, and not only safely, but in unison with each other, in connection with each other, moving and creating and developing meaning and purpose and beauty by the very fact that they had to relate to one another under certain limitations. I've said often to Ann Garner, our ministry intern, my colleague here, who works so closely with me and with all of us, laughingly, how do you help a bunch of rule breakers work together in a pandemic? Speaking about our congregation, every one of us is a rule breaker. That's how we got through the doors of this congregation anyway. That's what our tradition is. How do you help a bunch of rule breakers work together in a pandemic? And look at what we've done. Oh my Lord, how amazing. You heard a short list today in this service. What that dance company did is beauty in and of itself. It is a complete work in and of itself. One masterwork put on indefinite hold, still on hold today as I speak, but another one created out of the exigencies and the possibilities of the times that we're living in now. a real work, and as art also a metaphor for the ways that human beings can adapt. Last week, we did a little meditation in the midst of this meditation, a meditation of gratitude, thinking about the evolution and migration of Homo sapiens, of all of our ancestors, out of East Africa, spreading around the world over hundreds of thousands of years, over the last 300,000 years. And what made that evolution and migration possible in large part was the core human gift of adaptation. If human beings are good at anything, we can adapt. It is our resiliency and our art, our teamwork, and our beauty. The development of our language at the level of sophistication that we have. Other animals have language, but we have unique forms of language and immensely diverse language, rich and evolving patterns of language. That is one expression of our ability to adapt, to always find new words and expressions, to be able to comprehend and communicate our universe as best we're able through our words, so that even our silence when we stumble into it, and the heartbreak and the mysticism and the wonder of our world, even our silence is eloquent. And our ability to develop tools. Think about the tool that Andrew Cook is operating right now. What an amazingly sophisticated tool that did not exist 10 years ago, even less in this form, in this way. And the power that it gives us to work. What an amazing skill at adaptation we have. Our ability to form communal networks that can communicate and build tools and sustain learning over generations. That ability to develop communal learning is a large part of why not just human beings, but Homo sapiens were able to develop food sources and safety networks and family and tribal units, and then regional and national networks to sustain and perpetuate ourselves across the entire surface of the earth. Human beings who live in frozen Antarctica because of our ability to develop tools and extended learning in community. Our skill at adaptation is amazing. It is amazing. And as we say, it often comes under constraint. In the midst of the pandemic, one enormous work with a huge cash layout frozen in place. Worries about loss, about lost employment, about lost time, about the lost strength of body when you're a dancer. All of that loss and the pressure to develop a new work, to find a new way under all of these protocols in the pandemic. The dance company encountered one more major crisis, one that we all lived through and on some level felt. And in this congregation, many of us felt significantly, even acutely. The spring and summer of murder and protest because of the centuries of racism in our country. And whatever any of our politics, and by now you know well much of mine, that time affected us all. And the company found itself wrestling with the dynamics of power and hierarchy within itself, the pressures of the surrounding world, and is what they were creating relevant to the world? Is it worth being a dancer when people are marching in the streets? All of these questions about how we choose to live our lives and what vocation is, bearing down on them as they try to create a work under all of the constraints and limitations of the pandemic. Pressure building, under pressure, as the song says. And one young black dancer, one young woman making her career in this company, spoke to Bill T. Jones as the black male leader of this company. And she called out the hierarchies in the company. She called out the modes of communication and ways of working together, and even meanings that they created that were now passé, that were not sufficient for the day that we live. And for Bill T. Jones, this was a punch to the gut. This is a man who grew up the son of black migrant farmers in Florida. Just imagine. Imagine the poverty and the isolation, the deliberate exclusion. This is a man who made his way out of that context into the modern dance world of New York and a global theater. This is a man who discovered his own sexuality in contradiction to the pressures of his family and the pressures of his world, and who came into the fullness of his career and of his life and of his love and partnership with Arnie Zane in the 80s and in the 90s during a time of intense homophobia and violence against the LGBTQ community, and especially gay men. The time of the AIDS pandemic when so much blame and horrible vitriol was poured out. And he had created works deeply personal and connected to us all, individual and universal, that called out the political context of the time and that called out systemic oppression for LGBTQ people and for people living with HIV and AIDS and for people who are not white. All of this wrapped up into work that is also transcendent beyond that, so deeply personal and deeply human that it moves beyond brilliant work, the work of a genius. He is a genius. If you have not listened to this interview, stop this and go to the genius, because he is incredible to listen to and even more amazing to watch. Do it. Do yourself that favor. This is genius living in the world with us, sharing the world with us. This man who had done all of that work for decades, now when he's trying to lead a company and create something else and to provide employment for his dancers, including for this woman, now she speaks truth to his power and says, you also are sunk into the power structures. You also are beholden to money in these ways. We must rethink this. And he was mad. He spoke to his partner who died decades ago and said, Arnie, are you hearing this? Can you believe this? That we're being called out? But they were a team. And he was in covenant with her, choreographer and dancer. And they had a work to do. And despite his anger, despite all of his credibility, despite the pressure of the situation, he listened to her. He listened. When we are reared up for a project and on the go and ready to move, we must stop and listen to our team, because they say something important to us. And this young woman spoke something important to this veteran man. And despite himself, he listened. In aggravation and frustration, he listened. And they adapted. They adapted their systems, their ways of working. They adapted their purpose and their consciousness. That dialogue that they did, speaking and listening to each other, changed their consciousness, their awareness, and they developed a very different kind of work, responsive not only to the pandemic, not only to the need of work, for work, and the desire to make art, but to the question of racial justice in our time. All of these things drawn together, a work true to the fullness of the moment and therefore able to be transcendent of the moment, in time and out of time at the same time. Amazing, so beautiful, so to the heart, the individual heart and the collective heart. When we face our reality, when we see our limitations and our exigencies, when we stop to listen, there is nothing that human beings cannot adapt to address. We are made to evolve, and we are made to evolve together. That is how we have survived and moved and thrived and overcome again and again and again. This is Black History Month. And I'm offering the example of Bill T. Jones's work as one bright example of the power of Black witness and Black art and Black life for all of us in our country. Something that is absolutely about the social and political, and that is transcendent of it as well, that goes far beyond it. Next week, he's going to blow all categories wide open in a way that is difficult and beautiful for us all. His life and work is about facing the reality of our lives with as much clear-sightedness and truth as possible, so that we can be true in the moment and expand beyond the moment. It's so beautiful. And his own work is about being challenged by his life, by his identity, by the virus with which he lives, by now 2 epidemics and pandemics that he has lived through, HIV and now coronavirus. And his own willingness, despite himself, to be challenged by his fellow artists, to rethink the times that he's living in, to see reality more clearly. By his example, his beautiful, brilliant example, I want to invite us once more to enter into gratitude. Gratitude that liberates us to think. Gratitude that frees our minds from fear to find possibility. Gratitude that takes the very limitations, the pain and the heartbreak, the problems of our lives, and turns them into opportunity, possibility, art. I want to invite you, if you're comfortable, to just close your eyes and to bring to mind those people who have offered you real challenge in your life. Those people at any point in your life who called you to task in a real way. I'm not talking about abuse. I'm not talking about meanness. I'm not talking about the teacher who had a problem in their own life and they took it out on their students. I'm not talking about that. That's something else. I'm talking about the person who spoke truth to you to call you to deeper, clearer reality. Truth you did not want to hear. Truth that frustrated you and aggravated you. A truth that marched in the streets and carried signs and said, you got to listen, you got to listen, you got to rethink. I'm not talking about spin. I'm not talking about threat. I'm definitely not talking about violence. I'm talking about a person with the courage to speak truth to you, to challenge you and summon you to your better self. As our covenant says, the person, the people who have challenged you to face reality. And when you did, despite yourself, you leveled up. You created something out of the limitations of life that was truly brilliant. When you did it, all the lights came on and the electricity flowed. And there was a beauty in the world that we hadn't seen before. Think of that time, that meeting, that friend, that partner. They may still make you boiling mad. That defensiveness may still come up. That's okay. For that person, not the abuser, not the dominator, not the manipulator, the person with the courage to speak truth to you. Say thank you. Offer gratitude for the challenge. Feel how your mind opens up. It's a physical feeling of release and possibility. When we accept the challenge offered us, it expands who we are and the beauty of our being in the world and our ability to adapt, to create something new. It flows up from our evolutionary past through the millennia, hundreds of years, hundreds of thousands of years of migration across the face of this earth. People adapting and communicating and building so that we can exist today. That is the source of our deepest humanity, that we can face the truth and create something transcendent, even in the hardest times. Feel how that flows up through you and just feel gratitude. And along with that gratitude, not separate from it, in this month when we celebrate Black History, which we are dedicated to celebrate all through the year, every month, in this month of symbolic importance, let us once again give thanks for the truth spoken to power by the oppressed peoples of this country, especially Black people, to our whole country. We don't have to like it. We can resent it. But let us hear the truth and give thanks. Just gratitude. Gratitude instead of dismissal. Listening instead of bulldozing. And feel how our shoulders lift and our mind opens. Humans can adapt, and we can create a world, a nation, a society that is shared and beautiful and transcendent of the reality which we now live. This is Valentine's Day. And in the heart of that interview, there's a short video clip. If you haven't listened to the interview, please pause this and go listen to the interview, read it. But if you haven't done that, or if it's too long, find the little video clip right at the heart of the interview. It's short, it's like 3 minutes long. It's entitled Rumi, named for the medieval Muslim mystic from Persia, the great mystic of love, human and divine. In the pandemic, separate from one another, unable to even practice in the same space, Bill T. Jones took clips of dances that he and Arnie Zane had done when they were partners together in the 80s and early 90s. And he asked his dancers to study them and to dance them, to learn those phrases, those dance sentences as they call them, and to film themselves, each in isolation, each alone, in the limitations of the pandemic. This dance, Rumi, a dance of ecstatic love, worked and muscular and elevated and light, all of these things, so incarnate and human. They all did them in different places, different locations, different qualities of film. And as Bill T. Jones watched these, he was overcome with emotion. Because he was watching dances of love that he and his partner had done decades ago, before HIV, before Arnie died of complications due to AIDS, before the coronavirus pandemic decades later, before many of these dancers in his company had even been born. He was watching the dances they had done come to life in these dancers now, and watching them move in combination, not quite in synchronization because they're all dancing in different places, different times, but when the videos are brought together, dancing in connection and unison with each other. And it's just beautiful. It's just beautiful. You can hear their footfalls across space and across decades all together. This dance of love and separation, all the pain of distance and isolation and AIDS and coronavirus and loss and money and power and race and all of it there as they dance together. It's all there. It's so beautiful and human. He was overcome, and he spoke out across his heartbreak and across even greater distance of life and death. Think about it on this Valentine's Day. A man separated from the love of his life, who he calls in that interview the king of his heart. The king of his heart, he calls his partner Arnie Zane. He called out into the void, "Arnie, are you seeing this?" It's like he's still dancing, even though he's died. It's like he's still dancing. The technology, the tools, the connection, the art, the pain, the possibility, the heartbreak, out of that comes human adaptation to create something new. And that dance of love, those phrases, those sentences, the possibility that we can dance with one another even when everything else is broken and separate, even when we have died, even when the love of our lives has died, that we can speak to them and dance with them, whatever death is. That love is alive. That is what they built their pandemic-era masterpiece from. Those simple phrases, shared across decades and even across death. The human ability to create something out of brokenness and limitation and heartbreak that answers the call of our time and transcendent, expands beyond all limitations.
For all that is our life, we give our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with thanks and praise. For all that is our life, for all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build the common good
I'm feeling brave now. During his interview, Bill T. Jones reflects on developing a new dance for his company within the constraints and creative possibilities of a pandemic. He said, "I began to believe again in the communal nature. What does it mean to really have a community again? It means a new lease on a creative life. I'm feeling fierce and brave again, right now. Always full of doubt. But afterwards, this says, it's okay. It's okay. You can do it."
Gratitude. Gratitude for those who challenge us to adapt, to expand.
We have spent